Well, welcome to our viewers here in Nigeria and around the world. Thanks for joining us. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Here's what's coming up within the hour. French President Emmanuel Macron calls for snap parliamentary elections after the far-right party surged in the European Union election in France. BRICS plus foreign ministers convene in the Russian city of Nizhny Novgorod for a two-day meeting. Plus, northern China braces for record high temperatures in major heat wave. The World Today starts now. And we begin in Europe, where the French President Emmanuel Macron has dissolved the French Parliament and called snap elections in the wake of Sunday's European Parliament election results. Exit polls show opposition Marine Le Pen's national rally is set to trounce Macron's party in the historic win for her party. According to Macron, the French parliamentary elections will be held on June 30 and July 7th. The call for snap election is a huge surprise for the country and could pose a risk for the French president. Meanwhile, President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, who is also the lead candidate for the European People's Party, has vowed to strive for a strong Europe. The EU elections, which wrapped up on Sunday, projected the EPP winning 189 out of 720 total seats. Making her victory speech in Brussels, Ms. von der Leyen thanked voters for participating in the polls and putting their trust in her party, which she called the anchor of stability.
135 for Renew, 83.
Let me start by thanking the European voters who have participated in the European parliamentary elections for their trust. Today is a good day for the European People's Party. We won the European elections. We are by far the strongest party. We are the anchor of stability. And voters recognized our leadership during the last 5 years. Now, this election has given us two messages. First, there remains a majority in the center for a strong Europe. And that is crucial for stability. In other words, the center is holding. But it is also true that the extremes on the left and on the right have gained support. And this is why the result comes with great responsibility for the parties in the center. We may differ on individual points, but we all have an interest in stability, and we all want a strong and effective Europe. I have always said that I want to build a broad majority for a strong Europe. I have demonstrated in my first mandate what a strong Europe can achieve. My aim is to continue on this path with those who are pro-European, pro-Ukraine, pro-rule of law. And as of tomorrow, this work starts again. To conclude, of course, this election does not take place in a vacuum. The world around us is in turmoil. Forces from the outside and from the inside are trying to destabilize our societies, and they are trying to weaken Europe. We will never let that happen. And that's why I fight every day for a strong Europe. And these election results show that the majority of Europeans want a strong Europe. So thank you very much for your attention, and long live Europe.
Let's bring in the VOA's Lisa Bright. She's in Paris. Lisa, great to see you. And a pretty interesting 4 days it's been for many of the voters in Europe. What factors influenced the sentiment at the parliamentary elections?
I think it's a very different scenario than it was a few years ago. Let's take France, where I think it's the biggest bombshell although right-wing parties won in a number of European countries, let's say Austria, Germany, obviously Italy. So we had the far-right National Rally gaining about 31% of the vote, about a third of the electorate, and that's more than double the ruling party of Emmanuel Macron. So what was shaping the vote, according to analysts, and the outcome wasn't a huge surprise either, because this had been forecast. Polls had shown pretty much this scenario, are things like immigration, fears about immigration, fears about the economy, which isn't doing so well, concerns about things like the war. I think that von der Leyen mentioned, both in the one in Ukraine and also the Gaza conflict, the sense that that, let's say, mainstream parties aren't doing the job in some cases, like France, even though, as you pointed out, the center-right, did score very strongly. And then, when it comes to the left, particularly the Greens, which really, really lost quite a few seats, just the same kind of disaffectation. We saw all those farmer strikes, So other things beyond environmental concerns are kind of topping the list, and that has helped shape this kind of changing dynamic in Europe.
Let's focus a bit on France, where President Macron has called for snap elections, and some think that he may be risking his own political future. Why could this be true?
Yeah, and you mentioned that, and that's exactly what a lot of people are saying. This is like a gamble. Well, because polls consistently show that his party is not doing well. And so the question is, will people vote for the far right again? Will it get the kind of strong showing it got in the European elections? Voter turnout will be key, because analysis also shows that the turnout was particularly in the strongholds of the far right, even though it gained new strongholds. So, I mean, he could be gambling that we could see the Olympics with a far right prime minister, possibly Jordan Bardella, who's the one that the National Rally says is going to be, they would put in for the post. And I think Macron is gambling that perhaps he can form alliances, and perhaps people will be scared about the reality of having the far right in power in France. It's one thing to vote for European elections where they have, had little chance of gaining the majority. It's another thing to vote in a parliament. But of course, anything could happen right now.
Yes, and the opposition, Marine Le Pen's party, is likely to win majority in parliament, as she has run for president in the past, I think about 3 times. Is this an indication that France could be readying for her to take over in the near future?
Again, it's hard to say. Like with the parliamentary legislative elections, which are beginning at the end of the month, we'll see how the French vote. But it's no longer taboo to vote for the far right. I mean, I was here in 2002, and Marine Le Pen's father came in second in the national elections, and then the second round, you saw this huge wave of people. More than 80% went and voted for the president, Jacques Chirac, even though they didn't all agree with him. In this case, yes, it's quite possible that we could see Le Pen, and some people are even saying maybe Jordan Bardella will take her place as the next president in 2027. We'll see what the turnout looks like in these elections. This may be a precursor of what could happen. But again, it's important to remember that, the National Rally won 31% of the vote. The majority of French did not vote for them. How they'll vote this time around we'll wait to see.
Well, pretty interesting times ahead. But I think you did speak to this a little bit earlier, the start of this conversation, the political parties in Europe and their bases which have been shaken, especially in this election. We saw the shifts, and we saw, the concerns of the people. What does that tell us about their performance so far, how they have been able to reach out and explain policies to people, and if those policies are working and if people still believe in the parties in government, their popularity as well in the varying countries?
I think it depends on the country, but there are a few things to remember about these elections. The first is that, yes, in some cases, like France, clearly the ruling party and some of its, some of the others, like the Greens, weren't able to explain their policies well enough, or people just have other concerns like the economy, bread and butter issues that they find more important. They feel that in the case of in a number of countries like Germany also, where the far right did very well. Ditto with Italy with the right wing and Giorgia Meloni. There's all this concern about immigration security, as I touched on. One thing that one analyst told me, and this could be another thing that Macron is betting on, is it's one thing to be in the opposition, as pretty much most of the far right parties have been, and some are now getting into government. It's another thing to govern. And maybe Macron is betting that a couple of years with a far-right prime minister, French may, which would be the worst-case scenario for him, French may think otherwise, because it's one thing, again, to be in the opposition, another thing to govern. And if there's chaos, voters may turn around and vote for somebody else. So, yeah, in some ways it's a case of failure to deliver. But as you pointed out also, another point is that the European People's Party fared very well. Ursula von der Leyen's party fared very well. And so these are, people have been in power for quite some time, and this is more of a vote for stability. So I think the elections said a number of different things. Yes, a surge by the far right that was predicted, but not this kind of earth-shaking event so far, and we will see with the French elections what that delivers.
Yeah, you rightly pointed out Ursula von der Leyen, the European Commission president, did have a more favorable outcome in this election. She says her party is the anchor of stability. How is so?
Well, I mean, that's her take on her own party. But yes, it is towards the center. And what's interesting is that she also said in that speech that you used, that excerpt, she appeared to be reaching out to centrist parties, both to the left and to the right. And people think that she could also be potentially making a deal with the Greens in terms of maybe being more softer in fighting against. I mean, Ursula von der Leyen has actually done some really good things for the environment, but her EPP has watered down some of the issues, the environmental issues, and some analysts think she could be reaching out to some of the Greens to help gain a few more seats, or gains, especially because she's campaigning for another term, just gain more support for another term in office, and once, if she gets in again, gaining more support sort of both to the left and to the right. So it could be the anchor of stability, and I think a number of people really hope that will be the case.
And Lisa, this is a first election in Europe with the non-participation of Britain since 1979. It's all thanks to Brexit. So did it feel very different from when Britain was a member of the EU?
I think people have gotten to, yes, maybe for some voters, and certainly British voters who couldn't vote, or some of the expats, but I think a lot of Europeans have gotten used to the fact that Britain is no longer part of the bloc. And even though EU elections are definitely for the European Parliament, which, to be honest, many Europeans have not really spent a whole lot of time thinking about, except for maybe right now. These are still somewhat local votes or national votes. I mean, what's been happening in France is people have really been looking at the impact in France and what this may mean for the upcoming elections, and less so about what it means for the European Parliament itself. So I'd say that's kind of the fallout these days.
Lisa, thanks for being our eyes and ears on the ground.
Thanks so much.
We're still talking elections, but this time in the United States, where former President Donald Trump appears to have taken an ultimatum for incumbent President Joe Biden. He's challenged the U.S. president to take a cognitive and drug test prior to those presidential debates. He said this at a rally in Las Vegas on Sunday.
Cognitively impaired. No, I had a... Remember when Joe said it's great to be in Idaho, and he was in Iowa? He always does that. If I ever did that, it would be over. They'd say that's the end of his political career. He's cognitively impaired. No, I had a second test. I aced it. I aced both of them. Not easy to ace. Biden should have a cognitive test, number one. They say it's unconstitutional. That's a good excuse. He should have a cognitive test, and before the debate in 2 weeks, he should take a drug test, because I'm willing to take one. 30 years ago, he was considered the dumbest person in the U.S. Senate. Ted Kennedy told me that himself, who was a friend of mine, which is shocking that he was a friend. He was on a slightly different persuasion, Marjorie. But he told me that. He's the dumbest person in the Senate, and he has been from day one. They go after me for documents, and then they find out that Joe has 10 times the number of documents than me. I said, you have to be kidding. And they released him. I said, I don't want to be released like that. They released him on the basis that he's incompetent and he can't stand trial.
Away from politics, 9 Hindu pilgrims have died after suspected militants opened fire on a bus in the Indian Federal Territory of Jammu and Kashmir. The incident also left 33 people injured. According to officials, the driver of the bus lost control after the shooting attack, causing the bus to plunge into a gully. Authorities have announced a compensation of 1 million rupees, equivalent to $12,000, to the next of kin of the deceased and 50,000 rupees to the injured victims. The Indian Army have begun a manhunt to track down the attackers, with authorities vowing all those behind the heinous act will not go unpunished. However, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has taken stock of the situation, urging for the provision of the best medical care to those injured. Narendra Modi himself was officially sworn in on Sunday for a third term. The grand inauguration ceremony took place at the presidential palace in Delhi, with thousands of guests and heads of state in attendance. Among those attending were leaders of Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka and the Maldives. The presidential palace saw tight security, with more than 2,500 officers deployed around the venue. In his inaugural speech, Mr. Modi said he would uphold the sovereignty and integrity of India and govern with true faith and allegiance to the Constitution. It makes him the second Indian leader to win a third consecutive term after the country's first Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru. Mr. Modi, the leader of the BJP-led National Democratic Alliance, won the general election with 293 seats, sparking a resurgence of the opposition party, which won 234 seats. And all roads are leading to Russia. That's where the BRICS Plus meeting is holding. Foreign ministers of the BRICS bloc, including delegations from Turkey, Thailand, Mauritania, Venezuela and Cuba, have begun arriving in the Russian city of Nizhny Novgorod to attend the summit. A 2-day meeting marks the first gathering since the group expanded from 5 members to 9 in January. BRICS, which consists of Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa, now includes countries such as Iran, Egypt, Ethiopia and the United Arab Emirates as official members. The meeting, chaired by Russia, began with a minute's silence in memory of Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi and Foreign Minister Hossein Amir Abdullahian, who died in a helicopter crash last month. Discussions at the meeting are expected to focus on economic and trade cooperation, as well as regional and international issues, including the war in Gaza and in Ukraine. Let's check in on the war in Gaza. Israeli War Cabinet Minister Benny Gantz has quit the emergency government in a sign of deepening divisions over Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's post-conflict plans for Gaza. Mr. Gantz announced his resignation during a press conference on Sunday. He said the decision was made with a heavy heart. Speaking in Hebrew, Gantz was quoted as saying, "Months after the October disaster, the situation in the country and in the decision-making room has changed. Netanyahu and his partners have turned unity into an excited call without a cover in reality. Fateful strategic decisions are met with hesitancy and procrastination due to political considerations." Now, this comes as a health ministry run by Hamas in Gaza says 274 people were killed when Israel launched a raid on a refugee camp, leading to the rescue of 4 hostages over the weekend. On Saturday, Israeli forces backed by airstrikes fought intense gun battle with Hamas in and around Nuseirat refugee camp, freeing the captives. Have been reacting to the Israeli airstrike that hit the Nuseirat refugee camp over the weekend. A UN school was also attacked by Israel forces in the same neighborhood last Thursday in central Gaza. The health ministry run by Hamas in Gaza put the total of injured at 700. A former English teacher and resident of Nuseirat described the horrible incident, saying the heart of everyone in Gaza is full of endless sadness.
Yesterday it was a horrible situation happened about around 10 o'clock in our local time. Again, bombing everywhere and the airstrikes were everywhere. The people were running in fear and a lot of horrible things are going on the streets. The airstrikes continued for about 2 hours, more than 2 hours. And on all over Nuseirat area, my heart and even every heart of people here in Gaza is full of endless sadness. You don't know the miserable situation that we live in since the 7th of October. No electricity, no good water. Our daily needs, you cannot even get them. I wanted all the people know that Palestinian people are against bloodshed. I myself, I am against the bloodshed, even in their side, in the Israeli side, or on our side. I hate seeing the blood. I hate to see any people, any person who cry from pain. I hope that a human person, a human leaders will interfere to ceasefire soon, because you don't know the miserable situation that the people live in here in Gaza. Devastating situation, destruction, really. When you see them in tents or even in their houses, there is no hope. No, they killed everything inside us. You can't see here, no hope, no dream. No thinking about tomorrow, because there is no safe place here in Gaza. They may be bombed in any moment.
Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in the Middle East to push President Biden's latest three-phase proposal for a ceasefire in the Gaza war. Mr. Blinken, who has met with Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, is due to meet Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his defense chief in Tel Aviv later in the day. Ahead of his trip, Israel and Hamas both doubled down on hardline positions that have ruined all previous attempts to end the fighting, while Israel has pressed on with assaults in central and southern Gaza, among the bloodiest of the war. As well as pressing the ceasefire proposal, the U.S. official will also discuss the reopening of the Rafah border crossing with Egypt, a vital point for aid shipments into Gaza, and that Israel seized amid its ground invasion of the south of the enclave last month. Mr. Blinken is also expected to visit Jordan and Qatar. Checking in on the weather in China, where a major heat wave is forecast to spread across large swathes of the north this week, bringing record high temperatures into some areas. That's according to the Meteorological Authority. The heat wave, which began over the weekend, has already triggered government weather alerts and follows the country's hottest spring on record. The National Observatory issued an orange alert for high temperatures, the second most severe warning as sweltering heat engulfed the country's north. According to the National Meteorological Center, 7 national meteorological stations in the coastal province of Shandong recorded the highest temperature for early June, while temperatures in northern Hebei province and the western region of Zhejiang soared above 40 degrees Celsius. Local governments have also issued warnings as the heat wave is forecast to further expand in the scope of the coming days. In Korea now, where the North is being using trash balloons as a means of provocation and a tit-for-tat move, the South has stepped up its game, saying it will deploy loudspeaker broadcasts. South Korea is taking matter into its own hands, announcing it will resume its loudspeaker propaganda broadcasts against North Korea for the first time in 6 years in response to Pyongyang's campaign of sending trash-filled balloons across the border. And this announcement has triggered yet another wave of trash-laden balloons. Over 300 North Korean balloons were detected over the weekend, with around 80 of them landing in the south, carrying scrap paper and plastic sheets. It comes after the leader, Kim Jong-un's powerful sister, warned of further response if the South keeps its psychological warfare. While Seoul has slammed Rivers' North Korean acts as base and dangerous, Kim's sister warned that resumption of loudspeaker broadcasts is a prelude to a very dangerous situation. Here in Africa, the American and Nigerian armies have announced the departure of U.S. troops from the West African country during a joint press conference in Nigerian capital Niamey. Both countries signed an agreement on May 19 for the withdrawal of American troops. Since then, more than 269 items of the 946 and several tons of equipment have already left Niger. Before this withdrawal, the U.S. had over 1,000 troops stationed at 2 bases in Niger. The bases were tasked with monitoring Islamist militant groups in West Africa.
The Nigerian Ministry of Defense and the U.S. Department of Commerce recognizes the joint sacrifices by the forces of both countries in the fight against terrorism. They are delighted by the mutual efforts of American forces and the efforts of American forces. They are delighted within the capacity building of the Nigerian armed forces and express their commitment to pursue cooperation in areas of common interest.
And in South Africa, the clock is ticking for the African National Congress Party to make a concrete and final decision on what the government will be for the next 5 years. After losing its majority in Parliament in May's elections, the ruling ANC says it wants to form a national unity government with major opposition parties trying to avoid a coalition government with any single opposition group as it faces its toughest challenge yet. The ANC now has a constitutional deadline of June 18th to negotiate the specifics of the national unity government. But South Africa's Free Market Foundation has issued a stern warning against the proposed government of national unity, which seeks to incorporate opposition parties into the ruling coalition. The FMF argues that such a move, spearheaded by the country's president, Cyril Ramaphosa, following the African National Congress meeting last week, threatens the essential accountability and independence of the opposition.
With 23%.
And just a while ago, my colleague Layo Olarinde spoke with Free Market Foundation Communications Manager Morne Malan on the latest developments.
Well, I think the first thing that you have to note is that the government of national unity is actually little more than just a very broad coalition, which places the ANC as the senior partner in that coalition. So you could easily see a situation wherein a so-called GNU devolves into merely relegating all the other parties to junior partners and places them in government, but doesn't place them in power. So it actually co-opts the opposition into serving ANC policy objectives and limits their ability to oppose malfeasance on the part of the ANC. We believe that the South African people, on the one hand, voted for a parliament with no clear majority to any party, which is why politicians should respect that. And on the other hand, we do believe that the interests of ordinary South Africans are far better served by having no coalition, what we're calling a no-alition, as opposed to a coalition in Parliament.
You know, some experts believe that, there are advantages to both the coalition and a government of national unity. Can you elaborate on these merits compared to a government of national unity?
Yes, well, the way we see it is that the problem that we've had in South Africa for the past 30 years is that power was concentrated both on the executive level as well as on the legislative level. So when it came to promulgating new laws and when it came to effectuating those laws through the executive, those were both controlled by the same party. Those same risks exist even when there is a coalition. You still have this intermingling, this centralization of power. We believe that a far better system is one where both of these elements are devolved. One where on the legislative side, when the governing party wants to propose a specific law or wants to amend specific legislation, then they have to get broad consensus. Smaller parties should be allowed on a case-by-case basis to be to either support or to decline to support certain legislation. And when you do have the separation of parties, then it finally, for the first time in 30 years, makes it possible for Parliament to hold the executive to account for not doing their job. Whereas under a coalition, it would be very difficult for the junior partner in the coalition to attempt to hold the senior partner or the agents of the senior partner to account.
And, there are concessions that would be made, from the parties. What would you say are those important concessions opposition parties should demand if they were to consider joining a coalition government? Yes,
look, of course, we do believe that the best system would be a no coalition whatsoever, confidence in supply system, but that doesn't mean that there aren't certain significant radical concessions which could or which would make a coalition better or worse. Types of concessions that we believe would be crucial in such a coalition arrangement are things such as a dramatic increase in federalization, so to ensure that more local government on the provincial, on the municipal and on the community level, so they're empowered to take matters into their own hands, that they're allowed to address the issues which face their constituents directly and not to be as reliant on national government and to not be as subject to failure of governance on the national level. So that's one big one. Another one is the repeal of several pieces of poor legislation that we've seen over the past few months and the past few years, things such as the National Health Insurance Bill, the Bala Act, and so many others. So there are concessions which can make a coalition more attractive than it otherwise would be, but we still believe that even under such a circumstance, the interests of South African citizens would be better served by forming no coalition whatsoever.
Staying in South Africa, retrenched workers from the country's cash-strapped state-owned entity for the post office will start receiving their pension benefits this month. The entity's joint business rescue practitioner says it's completed all necessary administration requirements regarding the payments of the first portion of severance packages to retained workers. Meanwhile, non-payment of electricity bills by post office in some parts of the country has seen customers in rural areas having to walk long distances to access the services offered by the post office.
The Post Office's business rescue practitioners have completed all the necessary administration requirements regarding the payment of severance packages to retrenched employees. This means that they can make early payments of the first tranche of the retrenchment packages, which will reflect in ex-employees' accounts from week beginning 10th of June. First tranche payments were originally anticipated to be made by the end of June. Tranches 2 and 3 severance payments will be made this year in September and November respectively, as agreed with the Employee Committee and Organised Labour. The Post Office's UIF fund is fully funded, and retrenched employees can receive their unemployment insurance benefits through direct contact with the fund.
We're on to Nigerians making great strides abroad. A member of the Nigerian delegation at the United Nations, Ezekwesili David Anyegbu, has been elected by acclamation as vice chair of the 79th session of the United Nations Second Committee Bureau. The last time a Nigerian was elected as one of the principal officers at of a UN annual session was in 2019 when Ambassador Tijani Muhammad Bande was elected as the president of the 74th session of the United Nations General Assembly. Before now, Mr. Anyibu coordinated on behalf of the Group of 77 and China the UN resolution promoting investments for sustainable development on 3 consecutive occasions. He also facilitated and coordinated in national capacity the UN resolution strengthened voluntary national reviews through country-led evaluation adopted by the UN General Assembly on April 26, 2023. Speaking exclusively here on Channels Television, Mr. Anyibu explained how his new role opens up more opportunities for Nigeria at the UN.
Speakers that to the country of Nigeria, of course, at the moment, this year is a very critical year in terms of turbocharging the implementation of the SDGs. So it certainly means a lot when just opposed with the fact that Nigeria is also leading on various initiatives in the 2C. Of course, we are pushing for the adoption of the UN Framework Convention on tax cooperation, international tax cooperation, and this, of course, is in tandem with the renewed hope initiative of Mr. President and the 4D foreign policy as articulated by the Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs. And of course, Mr. President, upon assumption of office, did sign 4 executive orders on to curb multiple taxation and to boost ease of doing business in Nigeria. And he also established the Presidential Task Force on Fiscal Policy and Tax Reform. And here at the UN, against the backdrop of the UN resolution introduced by Nigeria through the African group, we now have an ad hoc committee on terms of reference for the UN Framework Convention on Tax. And they should come up with an outcome document by August. So certainly my election will certainly help Nigeria, enable Nigeria to consolidate and deepen various multilateral economic initiatives at the UN.
You can watch more of the interview with Mr. Anyibu on Diplomatic Channel. It airs tonight at 8:30 on Sky 515 in the UK and 11:30 p.m. on DSTV here in Nigeria. 4 years after we first told the story of a young Nigerian auto tech designer and machine fabricator, Jerry Malo, from the city of Jos in Plateau State, he's back in the news again with his latest automobile design, the Benny Sternum. Jerry Malo says he aims to put Nigeria on the global map as a powerhouse of automotive design. Our correspondent, Chris Lems, met with him, and here's what he had to say.
Welcome to the Benny Workshop, where innovation appears to meet determination. And Jerry Malo carefully crafting his next masterpiece, the Benny Sternum, from scratch. With meticulous attention to every detail, he ensures precision with each component. Jerry shares that the sternum represents a thoughtfully refined evolution of the Puri, which he built in 2019.
We designed the chassis in a way that you have hydraulic lifts in them that could lift the car up, so you have more ground clearance, just to give you more room to accommodate the potholes on the road. So yes, just keeping our cultures. Benny has a particular culture that our designs, the inspiration, a lot of inspiration was picked from the hare. That's the bush, the wild rabbit.
After countless nights of tireless devotion, Jerry Malo brings the sternum to life for its inaugural test.
You don't find companies that make everything by themselves, but at least making more than 50% of the part. And for us, in our case, we've made over 70% of the parts. The whole chassis was built by ourselves. The monocoque of the car was built by ourselves. The body of the car, the suspension system, the hydraulic systems were all built in-house. A good number of the electrical parts in the vehicle were all built by ourselves. So it's really indigenous.
A product of relentless hard work and boundless imaginative spirit. Jerry says his goal is to put Nigeria on the global map as a hub for automotive excellence. But he believes technology deployment is crucial to achieve this and streamline processes.
We will be able to upscale the production of our vehicles with the aid of equipment, with having the best of tools to guide our level of precision and improve our speed around our works.
Jerry Malo, like many countless young Nigerians, long for a country where talent is nurtured and innovation thrives. He, however, acknowledges that the government has a pivotal role to play in this journey.
If the government can build structures where there are state-of-the-art equipment, machines in there, that these talented minds can go and make use of the equipment to produce samples of their product, they would, in no time, almost be no limits to the ripple effect of good products that will be coming out as a result of these centers the government put into place.
In 2019, Channels Television highlighted Jerry's remarkable journey with the creation of the Benny Puri. Today, with the Stenum, he envisions an even brighter future with so many possibilities, with the right support and recognition.
That is some really impressive work. Staying in Nigeria now, but in Lagos State, where the government has concluded plans to provide access to a landmass of the state by embarking on a road and bridge projects that would link Shongotedo in Etiosa local government area with Ito Omu Creek in Ibejuleki, all here in Lagos State. A special advisor of the infrastructure, Special Advisor Office of Infrastructure, Mr. Olufemi Daramola, made the comment during an inspection of ongoing projects in the state. He says 20 road projects will be delivered as scheduled.
The Lagos State Special Advisor, Office of Infrastructure, Mr. Olufemi Daramola, is out with some of the technical officials from the ministry to inspect some strategic ongoing projects in some parts of the state. The first port of call is the reconstruction of the damaged Alakwere pedestrian bridge, outward Lagos-Ibadan Expressway and inward 3rd Mainland Bridge for the safety of citizens within the area.
The foundation works have been done. The elements for the beams are all being set off-site. Precast elements are all being set off-site, and we are having good progress on it. The headroom will be improved, and in another couple of months, another 2-3 months, I'm sure that project will be completed.
Ikoyi area of Lagos Island is the next stop, where he moves around the axis to see the progress of the network of roads at Oyinkan Abayomi, McPherson, Labere, and other adjoining streets.
We have Ilabere, maybe about 50%, the Inupa, and the other roads, yeah, they're good percentage progress, about 70, 80, they're about pavements in place, but we still have other works to go with it. And we are achieving good mileage. At the end of that exercise, it will still be in line with our regeneration of those areas. You'll find out that some set of roads were done in Ikoyi previously, and this set again will add more connectivity, but the progress of work there is very commendable.
The journey continues from Ikoyi Link Bridge to Lekki area to inspect the Lekki-Epe Phase 2 Expressway project down to Mayegun, connecting the coastal road construction. Omo Creek
is also one of the strategic projects ongoing by the administration of Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu, with 600 meters of bridge to link Shangotedo in the Etiosa local government area, all still in the works.
It's a road that has a total of about 5 kilometers with about 600 meters bridge, about 1.1 kilometers from the Lekki-Ekpa Expressway. What we've witnessed today is really good progress. There's been a lot of soil reclamation, right-of-way acquisition, and you can see as evidence, the contractor is on ground. A lot of soil replacement has gone on. We've been able to get to the abutment points where the bridge works will start. A lot of soil investigation is going on, and the progress is very commendable, and with the way it is, we'll see much more progress in recent times.
The state government says all the ongoing 20 road projects across various divisions of the state will be delivered before the end of Governor Sanwo-Olu's tenure.
So our co-step can go this way.
This Sunday was the 67th edition of the National Puerto Rican Day Parade, a parade that is usually held on the second Sunday in June in honor of the 3.2 million inhabitants of Puerto Rico and all people of Puerto Rican birth or heritage residing on the U.S. mainland. Marchers and revelers dressed in vibrant red and blue filled the Fifth Avenue in Manhattan, New York, to mark the event. New York City's largest Latino parade features 170 groups and 70 floats. This year's event was based on the theme Puerto Rican in Your Heart, with over 50 individuals recognized for their contributions to the arts, education, sports, and activism. Many attendees were part of various Puerto Rican cultural organizations celebrating their heritage. The first Puerto Rican Day Parade was held on Sunday, April 13, in 1958 in Manhattan, replacing the former Hispanic Day Parade.
Celebrate the joy and beauty and pride and orgulloso of the Puerto Ricans. It's a beautiful day in New York City.
And I can confidently tell you there is a new Guinness World Record that has been set all the way in Mexico. And that's the largest glass of wine in the world. It's in the Mexican city of León. Visitors were seen on Sunday taking pictures next to the giant wine glass. They were also socializing as a Guinness World Records representative introduced the concept of the record and closed by outlining the record set. According to the Guinness World Records representative, the glass must be filled with a commercially available wine and distributed for fit consumption among persons of legal age. The Guinness World Records certified the final figure at 4,805.36 liters. With this result, Mexico has unlocked a new record for the largest wine glass in the world. Visitors explained that they enjoyed the event as it allowed them to sample a variety of Mexican wine and experience all that Mexican wines can offer. I think it was just an excuse for people to drink. But thanks for watching The World Today. I'm Amarachi Ubani.